Hi, I'm one of the architects here at Formed Architects, and today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how much time you should allow before you can think about starting your home residential extension project or refurbishment project before you can start, really. And normally this is driven by the kind of statutory approval process, and I'll talk a little bit about what that involves. And the reasons behind this question, really, how much time should I allow? Because often people come to us and say they want to start on site in 2 weeks or even less than that in some instances. Sounds crazy, but there is often quite a lot of work to do before you can start. And those conversations are often driven by the fact that they have already got a builder in place, but no drawings and no approvals. So the first thing you need to really understand is what approvals do you need in place? And you may well need planning, building regulations from a statutory perspective. Those are typically the key ones. Party wall elements will come into play, and that is a statutory requirement in some instances, and also CDM regulations about health and safety. So those are typically the 4 statutory things. If you live in a flat, you may also be required to obtain landlord or freeholder's consent, and that can also take its own sort of self-duration in that regard. So typically, we say from the point that you approach us, you should allow at least 6 to 8 months before you can actually start works on site. And that is to allow yourself a good period to get the statutory approvals in place. And that doesn't factor in any councils that are currently taking longer to get planning across the line. So we have had some instances recently locally where planning departments are overstretched. They're not getting decisions out within the sort of 8-week period that you'd expect. And in some instances, it's taking 3 to 6 months to get planning, and all of this will also depend on your risk appetite. So typically what you want to factor in is from the point that you engage us, we need to then get a measured survey done. A measured survey is somebody comes around and measures your house as it currently stands, and then we get a set of accurate drawings. We then develop a design based on your brief. And that can involve a couple of conversations with yourselves, some toing and froing. And it's important to explore the design process because obviously you're going to be investing a lot of money, and we want to make sure we get it right at the outset. Changes when they're on site are expensive, so you want to bottom out as much as possible at the outset before you get to that stage. And we like to do it before we go in for planning, primarily because that can affect what you put in for planning. So positioning of windows and doors are typically dictated by what goes on inside, and hence we explore the design at the earlier stage. So design, you can expect that to take, once we've got the survey back, anywhere between sort of 3 to 6 weeks. Then we'd be in a position to make some drawings for planning submission. We'd develop the packages for planning, and after that, then subject to your appetite to risk, and some people are comfortable getting a planning application in and then developing the detailed building regulations drawings at the same time, accepting that if the planners make some changes, then you may well need to pay for additional fees to get those changes implemented to the building regulations set. So all of these things impact the duration of time. So assuming you wait until you've got planning in place before you get your building regulations drawings put together, once you've got your building regulations drawings put together, once you've got planning in place, then you get your building regulations drawings, and that might involve the coordination with the structural engineer and the architect. So you could be looking at, about 7 to 8 weeks for that process in itself. That would then run in parallel with the party wall process, which can in itself take up to 2 months, subject to the way that your neighbours react. So you can see that it's not as straightforward as saying, okay, we want to be on site within the next 2 months. Unless you're doing something straightforward, the statutory process in itself, as I said at the outset there, takes about 6 to 8 months, and you should allow for that. That pre-planning stage is likely to save you a lot of time and heartache during the build, because you'll have probably made a lot of decisions at the outset, got all the paperwork and the requirements in place before you start the works. What you then will want to factor in is if you have got a building regulation set, if you are developing that into a more detailed construction set with your architect or your team, including what we call a tender pack, which includes all the details around finishes and things, then that will also take that little bit longer. But in our experience, all of those decision-making stages at the outset are likely to save you a lot of time and money when it gets onto site, because you've chosen everything at the beginning. It means that people can run through the design in a kind of structured and logistical way in terms of getting the orders on site at the right time, and so you should end up with a more seamless build. But we've had lots of experiences where that works really well when people have made the decisions at the outset, and lots more experiences where people kind of tied against that advice and to start works before they've got all the approvals in place, or before they've got the full sort of builders pack together, and then they end up in a slight pickle with builders charging them more than they should. So hopefully you'll avoid that by following the advice. Ideally get all of the packages ready before you start, and then that should allow for a really stress-free build. So in answer to the question, how much time should you allow before work start on site? Typically 6 to 8 months.